Hi there, this is Isolde Trachtenberg, and I am thrilled to be here with you to talk about storytelling. One of the things that I think a lot of us are probably going through right now is it's not about keeping from being bored because there's always something to do, right? But it's about how we can best sort of keep exercising that brain muscle, that mind muscle. And I have been talking about this a lot on my podcast called the Creative Mindset, which is all about how to use creativity for problem solving and for thinking differently, for innovating everything in your life. So I talk on the podcast. I talk to everybody from fashion photographers to actors to architects to people who are working to on the environment, things like that. So there's a lot of different subjects on there, but it's all about creativity. And so today I wanted to talk about our creativity muscles. Basically, how can we keep those exercised so that we are able to tell the story of our own life, and every one of us is a storyteller. From talking about how your day went to dinner, to talking about a recipe at dinner, to making excuse for why you didn't get your homework done, you're telling a story, right? Anytime you open your mouth and go, you're not going to believe what happened to me, right there is a story. So in order to accept the mantle of being a storyteller and telling your life stories or telling fictional stories, you have to change your perspective a little. So I want you, even if it feels a little silly, right now, take a second. Let's see if I can. Ooh, I'm darker. Right now, take a second and see if you can change your perspective. Think about the phrase, I can tell stories. And just say that to yourself a couple of times. I can tell stories. I can tell stories. I can tell stories. It might sound a little strange, but it's a really good way to just open that part of yourself up. And if you can do that, try it for a second. I'm just going to hang out here and wait. Hi. I see that there are some people watching. I'm really glad you're here. Yay! I love that Lady T just said, I could tell stories. That's right, you can. And here's the thing. If you can tell them, you can write them. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about how to tell our stories and not only tell them verbally, but to write them down. So I want you to remember that anytime you tell a story of anything, you're bringing value. No one has your experience, your point of view, your unique perspective on what you think and what you've lived through in your life. So you telling your story, whatever it is, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, it's something that's unique, and it frankly would not exist at all in the world if you weren't the one to tell it, right? Because nobody knows you as well as you. Nobody knows what's going on inside your noggin as well as you. So I want you to breathe into that with me. I want you to take a second, remind yourself that you can tell stories. And if that makes you feel a little uncomfortable, that's okay, because growth doesn't happen without discomfort. So we're going to grow together. And one of the best ways to do that is to accept that you have this birthright of telling your story. And in fact, I talk about this I teach singing also, and I talk about this in my singing classes. What's the first thing you do when you're born? What's the very first thing you do? Anybody want to take a guess? The very first thing you do. Put it in the comments if you have it. What do you think? Very first thing you do? You take a big old breath. And what's the next thing you do? That's right, take a breath. Exactly, Lady T. That's exactly what you do. And what's the second thing you do? Yes, Sabrina, you cry. You make sound. In other words, you're announcing yourself. You're telling a story. Now, you may not be doing it verbally with language, but boy, are you saying something, right? So let's start with, yeah, exactly. First you breathe, then you make sound. Then you tell a story like, hey, I'm hungry. Hey, what's going on? Whatever's going on there. It's pre-verbal. We're not thinking in words at that point. Or maybe we are, but we can't communicate them. I don't know that part of it. But the point is that we breathe and then we say something. So I want you to take a second and I want you to do this breath exercise with me. It's really simple. I want you to sit back in your chair, put your feet flat on the ground, and I'm going to talk you through a really simple little breathing exercise that will get you back in touch with your breath and get you back in touch with your creativity. And all you have to do is breathe out all the way, first of all. Take a second, breathe out. And then inhale for a count of 4. Ready? And inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath. 2, 3, 4. Then inhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath. 2, 3, 4. One last time. Inhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath. 2, 3, 4. Isn't that interesting how you feel different? You just can't help it. As soon as we get in touch with our breath, everything changes. And as a storyteller, you need to have good breath, because if you're doing it verbally, you have to have both the physical breath, but also the confidence that breathing deeply like that can give you. And if you're writing, I never sit down to write without doing that exercise, because it opens up a different part of me. I've written 6 books. 4 of them are nonfiction and 2 of them are fiction. Hang on, let me shift away for just a second and get you there. The 2 fiction books. So here's The Fiddler's Talisman, which is book 1 in the Fairy Godmother Diary series, and here's book 2, The Piano's Key, in the Fairy Godmother Diary series. These aren't really young adult, even though it may look like it because of the covers. They're a little bit more mature themes, but I wrote the stories in part because I was inspired to, and in part because I remembered to breathe, right? So anytime I sit down to write, no matter what books I'm writing, no matter if I'm working on nonfiction or fiction, I take that moment and I take a breath. Okay, so let us move on. If I am talking about one of my books or a story that anybody is telling or writing, what are the elements of a good story? Let's talk about that. Does anybody know what the elements, what are the things that make up a good story? What do you think? Put it in the comments. If you've got them, if you've got ideas, go ahead and put something in the comments and let's see. Okay, so either the comments are a little slow or something's going on. Let's see. No, I can't. There aren't any comments coming through. Unfortunately. Oh, darn. Okay, well, we're going to keep on going. So, the elements of a good story. First, Lady T Productions says flow, and somebody else says humor, and somebody else says something about description. Hold on. Plot, movement, description. These are all great. These are all terrific. I'm so glad that you have these ideas. Perfect. These are all elements to a story. Can you have a good story without humor? Well, there are lots of sad stories out there that are amazing stories, and they may have a little humor to them, but they may or may not be able to complete as far as a good story with or without humor. So yes, some humor absolutely is good, but it's not crucial, right? Plot, absolutely. I think we need to have a good plot in order for a story to unfold. Description, it's funny that you said description, Sabrina Joy. It's very interesting to me because one of the things that's happened over time is the way we write stories has changed. So if you were writing in the time of Jane Austen or Thomas Hardy, you would spend a long time describing the way things were. And nowadays, interestingly, most books aren't as description filled, right? They will leave a lot of the descriptions to the imagination of the reader, which I'm a little sad about because I like descriptions, but a lot of times what's happening now, sort of in more commercial books, is that they're talking more about plot and action, moving things forward. It's almost like books have become more movie-like. or a play-like, because there's dialogue and there's action, there's forward motion based on that. Description is not as prominent. I still think it's important, but I love the idea of using description to push the plot forward. So it's not like, well, the room had lavender walls and 14 portraits on it and a couch that had blue cushions. Okay, but what if Maureen ran into the room and brushed up against one of the 14 portraits. She grabbed a blue cushion from the gold sofa and threw it at Jackson. I don't know, right? I'm making this up as I go along as far as that. But do you see what I mean? All of a sudden there's the description of the room still comes through, but I didn't just go, the room had 14 portraits and a couch with blue cushions. I made the description part of the story I was telling. So I'm going to give you some more elements of what is a good story. The story has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. We can't really tell stories without doing that, right? It also has to have a point of view. So somebody needs to be telling the story. It could be in the third person, she, he, they. It could be in the first person, I. There are some stories that are being told, some books that are being written, you, in the second person. Personally, that one kind of makes me go, I don't know. But yeah, a point of view, an opinion, if you will, and then a character, one or more characters usually in a story. The character doesn't have to be human, but somebody has to be in the story. Often, you want dialogue. Can there be a story without dialogue? Sure. And there are plenty of stories out there without it, but most of the time we relate best to dialogue, to people talking, to moving the action forward through what we say and what we do. There needs to be some sort of a tension or conflict within the story, and there needs to be some sort of a denouement, a resolution, something where the story resolves in one way or another. Most of the time. Are there stories that don't resolve? Yes, but they end up leaving us sort of conflicted or anxious, right? It's kind of like cliffhangers in television shows. They'll do that at the end of the season. Did she fall off the cliff and die? And then people get upset if the TV series gets canceled and it got left on a cliffhanger and everyone's like, we want a 2-hour movie to wrap everything up. I'm sure you've heard that, or maybe you've felt that yourself. So it's interesting to think about what does it mean to leave things unresolved? If you're okay with leaving things unresolved in your story, great. But most of the time people want a resolution. By the way, I'm a storytelling nerd, so I created a little webpage that I'm going to tell you about later, all about this little mini workshop we're doing. But I'm actually looking at a PowerPoint presentation as I do this that I created, and I'll put the PowerPoint presentation up there too, so that you can have access to everything we've talked about. So how do we get ideas for stories? First, I use something I call overheard. You can be inspired in any number of different ways, but I'm a notorious eavesdropper. I listen to anything and everything, right? So how do I do that? I sit at a Starbucks or at a Panera or wherever I am, and I keep my ears open. And one of the ways to do that, one of the best things you can do, is pay attention. And if you're paying attention to the stories around you, things will happen. Now, I know we're in a position now where we're not going out very much, but that's okay. You can do a line from a book. You can see a picture in a magazine and let it spark what you have created, right? What you want to create. I'm a shameless eavesdropper, so I do that. So I'm gonna give you a really wonderful little exercise that is super simple to do that will improve your listening skills immensely. First of all, keep an open mind. Second of all, I want you to take the tips of your fingers and I want you to just rub your ears. Like literally give them a good rubbing up and down the whole ear. Good rubbing. There you go. Just rub for like maybe 20 seconds. And then what's going to be really interesting is once you stop, go ahead and stop, you're going to find that you hear me a lot better. It's just one of those things. It just works. You just hear better because you've sensitized the nerve endings in the ears to basically capture sound a little better. So anytime you need to listen better, like if you're talking to a friend or a spouse or anything like that, and you need to really have your listening skills go where you need them to go and really pay attention, take a second and rub your ears and invite the other person to do it too. You'll hear each other better, you'll pay attention better. It's just something that works. So when I do overheards, when I do this, I actually have, and maybe I'll put a link to that too. I've been keeping track of my overheards for years. Anytime I overhear a cool conversation, I put it up, and I'm going to eventually release it as a book because it's so fascinating what people say that they don't realize they're saying, and also what people say just as a matter of course. Like, these are the things that we say to one another and we don't even realize we're saying them. So I sit in Starbucks and I work, and whenever some kind of conversation or something happens around me that I am surprised by, that I think is, oh, that's a cool thing, I write it down. So once I've gotten my ears rubbed, here's what I do. And Lady T, you're welcome. I'm so glad that you're pleased by that. Okay, so here's a story that I heard. This is a little snippet that I overheard. A mom and her daughter walked into the Starbucks where I was. And all I heard was the daughter said, "Mom, when I grow up, I'm going to be a climate scientist and a superhero." And her mom says, "Honey, if you grow up and you're a climate scientist, you will be a superhero." And that's all I heard. And I thought, that's fabulous. What a great story, right? Just like right there. So that was what I overheard. But here's what I did with that. I turned it into a little story. Okay? I know, it does work, doesn't it? The little ear rubbing, it's so cool. So I'm going to read to you the little story I wrote just today, just before this little mini workshop. I wrote this story about this particular overheard. The Starbucks was hopping as Chloe and I walked in. She tried to pull her hand from mine. "Chloe, you need to stay with me," I said. "Mom, I'm already 7 years old. I can go just over there," she grumbled, but I kept a tight grip on her hand. "Mom, when I grow up, I want to be a climate scientist and a superhero," Chloe announced as she pointed to a reduce, reuse, recycle poster on the wall. "Honey, if you become a climate scientist, you will be a superhero," I said. I released her hand and she skipped to the new environmentally friendly cup display. "She's growing up," I whispered to myself. "My baby's growing up." And that was the story I wrote from that little tiny overheard. Now, again, stories don't have to be long to be good stories. It can be a tiny, tiny, tiny little story. That part's not a problem. This story has a point of view, right? There's a change that happens. There's a conflict and there's a resolution. And there's dialogue. There's two very obvious characters, and it happens very quickly. It doesn't have to be something that is long and involved to be a good story. And that's why I started doing this project that I did a number of years ago. It was called the 1 minute story, right? The 60-second story. What it is I was writing a little micro story every single day for a year. And I did it from a prompt word. So I had a little tiny seed of a subject, but I wrote the whole story in 1 minute. And I could edit it after the 1 minute. But, I'm so glad you loved it. Thank you. She loved the story. So I wrote the story in 1 minute, and I had to stop at the 1 minute. Like, I could finish the sentence that I was writing at the 1 minute bell, but I had to stop, right? That was important. So that really revolutionized how I wrote, how I told stories, because it got me into that place of not only listening and observing, like we were talking about earlier, to begin being a storyteller, but also it got me into a place of quickly being able to start thinking like a storyteller. So, Lady T, we should do that during this. I'm sorry. Hang on. I don't see what you're saying because it's not coming through. Hold on. Yes. Lady T Production says we should do that during this crazy time to share later. Absolutely. I think that's a great idea, and I'll give you resources for that in a minute. Okay, so how do we begin? Well, you can start any story with once upon a time. Or the one I used earlier with, you're not going to believe what happened to me, right? But you don't always have to start at the beginning. In fact, one of the things they tell you in writing classes nowadays is start in the middle of the action, right? It doesn't have to be on the day the Big Bang happened. Like James Michener starts a lot of his novels with like the formation, Hawaii, his book Hawaii starts with the geologic formation of the Hawaiian island chain. That's a long time ago, right? You don't have to do that. You can start right in the middle. It doesn't have to be something that is, and I don't mean I mean in the middle of the action. So the story still has a beginning, but it is something that is that starts happening. Like Maureen slammed the door. That's a beginning, actually, because now you go, did she leave the house or did she just come into the house? Or is she leaving work because she just told them to take this job and stuff it? There are any number of different things that you can do just from that one sentence, right? So you can tell a story by starting in the middle of an action. It's still the beginning of the story and will take us through a middle and will take us through an end. But it's not, you don't have to always go, I have to write the perfect first sentence. You don't. In fact, I often will face a blank page and go, I'm going to start with the second sentence. Or I'm going to start with, I don't know what to write. Doggone it. And as soon as I just start, I write best when I either speak into a phone, voice to text, or on a computer. Some people write better with paper and pencil. And in fact, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and grab a piece of paper and a pencil because I'm going to ask you to write something. So take a second and go do that. And I'm just going to keep talking. So what's interesting about writing, you don't have to, as I said, you don't have to begin with the first sentence because people will tell you the first sentence is super important. It dictates whether or not people are going to keep reading your stuff, right? So that's true to an extent, just like the book cover is really important, for example, if you write a book. But when you're writing, you can wait to craft the first sentence. In fact, I know some writers who wait to craft the first sentence of the book until after they've finished the book. So they start with the second sentence, or they start with blah, 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 freaking blah, 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 I don't know what to say. And you can also ask yourself the following question. If I did know how to start this story, what would I say? And that somehow puts a different spin on your brain and lets you actually do this whole idea of working this the way you need to, because it gets you out of your own way. One of the things that happens to writers, because the story that is coming straight out of your soul, it's a very personal thing, no matter what story you're telling. So you want to give it the weight it deserves, but you also want to take some of the weight off your own shoulders, because it's a big deal to tell a story. So you want to be telling it in a way that feels as open as possible, but doesn't feel like it, and doesn't feel like it's crushing you, because that happens sometimes. You feel like, there's so much. Anyway, so here's what I want you to do. We're gonna do some writing together, and it's gonna be a little micro story. It's not gonna be something big. I don't want you to think about it in any way of as a it must be perfect. That's not what this is. I want you to think about it a little differently. I want it to be a micro story, so we're only going to take a minute. I want you to take no time to plan it, because I'm going to give you a prompt word, and I'm just going to say, here's the prompt word, write something. It's got to be immediate written work, and you don't want to do like this kind of writing all on your own unless you happen to have an inspiration. For me, writing micro stories is about accessing a part of my brain that tells stories quickly, because it lets me get into that flow. So I'm going to give you a prompt word, and I want you to not think about it, just write. And there's a great website. Actually, there was. I don't know if it's still up, but it's called oneword.com. That's what I used back when I did my one story a day project. And if you want access to that project, I'll put it out on the website too, on that little webpage that I created for this, that I will tell you the URL at the end. I think I'll put the link to the 60-second story project as well, so that you can read some of those, because I have the prompt word and then I have the story I wrote. Excuse me. Hang on one sec. Let me grab some water. Anyway, so I want you to not think, just write. And that little statement is from that oneword.com story. It gives you a prompt word and it gives you a 60-second timer, and you just go. So Here we go. Here's your one-word challenge. I'm going to give you 60 seconds, and I'm going to ask you to write something about the prompt word I'm going to give you. And here are the elements that I want you to think about, okay? I want you to think about having at least one character doing something. I want you to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I want you to include the word. And that's it. And by the way, don't edit, okay? Do you know that song, The Gambler? You gotta know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em, know when to run away, know when to, no, I don't even remember, know when to walk away, know when to run. Here's the pertinent line. You never count your money. When you're sitting at the table, there'll be time enough for counting when the dealing's done. And that's the whole point, right? Is that you don't want to do it right then. When you're writing, play the cards. When you're editing is after you've walked away from the table, right? So there'll be time enough to edit later. That's not what we want to do right now. What I want you to do right now is focus on doing the writing. So I'm going to ask you to go ahead and get that piece of paper and pen, and I'm going to try it too, actually. Let me get my computer open, and we're going to literally take a minute, and we're going to write a story. And here is your prompt word. The prompt word is the word copper. And I'm going to set up a little timer for 60 seconds. And remember, don't think, just write, right? That's all I want you to do is just grab that piece of paper. Don't think about it too much. Have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Have a character doing something. Doesn't matter what it is. And use the word. That's all I want you to do. So here we go. Are you ready? On your mark, get set. The word, remember, is copper. On your mark, get set, go. Okay, and time. Da-da-da. Okay, done. There we go. So, how did you all do with your story? Was it weird to try? It's like, oh, what's going on? How do I do this? I don't even know what to do. And I get it. At first, it feels really odd because you don't know how to get yourself into that headspace. So, I'm going to read to you what I wrote and see how it feels, okay? And I would love it if somebody if you want to put your story in the comments, that'd be cool. So here's the story I wrote with copper, and I just wrote it just now. Copper piping! They've been eating the copper piping, Captain Marks yelled over the comms. What? Colonel Smith said. How did they get in? There's a hole in the hull on outer deck 3. Oh, we're done for. And that was the story. That was as far as I got. So I love writing to short timed prompts. Yes, it's so much fun, isn't it? So yeah, Sabrina Joy, I think it's a great way to do it. And I'd love to see if anybody decides they want to share their story of what they wrote. That'd be cool. So that story is actually, we're done for. It kind of is like, but it could have gone longer, right? There's all of a sudden this science fiction story of a ship, and somebody has started eating the copper piping in the spaceship. Well, that's cool, right? All of a sudden I have either a much longer story I can do just from that one prompt word, or I can leave it alone and have it be finished, right? So that's a really cool way of doing it. All right, now I'm going to ask you to think about another story possibility. I have these little cards that I have developed that I think are pretty cool. I'm going to show them to you. Let's see. So you can have a profession, you can have a location, and you can have an object, right? So these are all different. These are cards. They're cards with just the name, the word of an object, a location, or a profession. And why do I have them? Well, Lady T wrote, Trixie McSparkle was running around all day helping everyone take care of their needs. But she was doing it... I can't read the whole thing because now all of a sudden it says see more. Doggone it. Hold on. Let me open up this back and let's see if I can get to it. Because I want to read the rest. It sounds really cool. Yes. Good. I'm seeing the comments. Because I want to read it to everybody who's not... come on. Facebook is slow because so many of us are on it, I think. All right, here we go. It says, Trixie McSparkle was running around all day helping everyone take care of their needs, but she was doing it was she doing it in a proper manner? Who knows? Who cares? All that is important is that she was doing and helping. Oh, and Lisa says, this didn't come out of story, but here's what I wrote. Great. Hopefully it will come through and across. Sorry, Sabrina Joy, I'm sorry you need to duck out. I know this is probably running a little bit longer than usual, but what can I say? I'm a talker. Anyway, it is interesting, Lady T, because it's the beginning of a story, right? It's about someone who is a helper, and it could be a really cool story. So, here's Lisa Lynch's story. I love to use the color copper. It is a symbol of the DNA of Mother Earth. Please enjoy sensing the color coming into your body now. That's beautiful. If that's what you wrote, that's wonderful. Remember, storytelling doesn't have to be something that is only one thing, right? So I'm going to give you one last prompt for you to use, and it's actually three. I'm going to give you a location. I'm going to choose a location. I'm going to choose an object, and I'm going to choose a profession. And we don't have to do this all together, but I'd love it if you come back and post in the comments if you write stories. So I'm going to choose a location. My cards are falling. I'm going to choose a profession. Interesting. And I'm going to choose an object. Okay. So the three things that I chose, the three words that I chose are a forest, a diplomat, and a mobile phone or a cell phone. So here's your mission. We don't have to do this now because I know we probably have to stop. But your mission is to write a story, take a minute or two, and write a story incorporating a diplomat, in a forest, and something to do with a cell phone. And see if you can come up with a story that feels open and free and has that beginning, middle, and end. We know who the character is. The character is a diplomat. We know that there could be a conflict. He could be lost in the forest and his cell phone has died. Any number of things could be happening that cause the conflict in the story, and then a resolution. And what could be the resolution? He could be found. He could find his cell phone. He could figure out that the sun is setting and it's setting in the west, and he could walk towards the west once he has a direction. Any number of things could happen. So the story is born from that, if you see what I mean. I don't know if you all have any questions, but if you do in the comments, you can feel free to comment and I'll try and answer them. Or you can get in touch with me. You can find me at https://writer.isoldat.com. And I have created that little web page for you in case you want to start writing your own book. Oh, I'm so glad. I'm glad that you enjoyed it, Lady T Productions. That's really cool. You can go to the website, and I have put all of the words that are on these cards into a little table on the webpage, And the webpage is https://isoldat.com/creativity-muscles. And I'll put the link to it in the bottom of the comments for this video. Because if you want to start writing your own book, I've created a little PDF that I share with my students that takes you through how to takes you through how to start writing your book. So you can have that, because it's actually really a step-by-step, this is what you need to do to write a book, to start writing your book, and also the words there. And you can see the covers of my 2 fiction books up close if you want. So I hope that you've had fun with this little mini workshop. I've had such a blast working with you, and I hope you tell your stories. We're all storytellers. It is our birthright. Remember, first we breathe, then we tell some sort of story. I hope to see you all again. Get in touch if you have questions, and I will put the links to everything in... I'm glad that you had such fun. Good. I'll put the links to everything in Viral Alchemy so that you have that. And until next time, thank you so much. Bye-bye.